begged for this life. Did you think there wasn't a price to pay?
She said that it wasn't her son.
Who is she? Answer me, Payne!
In a few weeks, I'll be announcing my candidacy for president.
Puppy dog.
One day in the middle of church windows, we're gonna find out that our country no longer belongs to us and nobody will even care!
Conspiracy from hell!
Oliver Stone's Wild Palms continues next Tuesday at 9 on BBC2.
You've seen the future, and its name is Wild Palms. The dream begins on this BBC video, out now.
I saw the motorcade Friday as you passed along Cedar Springs, and I waved and felt so proud that I had been given the privilege of seeing my president and his wife.
I remember Jackie rang when I come over for dinner, and I said, I don't know, aren't you going to be the first people that the Russians blow up tonight? She said, we'll all go together.
Any effort to explain what happened in Dallas must explain Lee Harvey Oswald. He is not, I put it in simple words, an easy man to explain.
Perspectives on the death of a president. Kennedy Night, starting at 8:20 Sunday on BBC2.
This is BBC2. Now, a new series of 40 minutes begins with the story of one family's shattered dream.
My mind at the time I was in Bosnia was warped, and it was close to having a short circuit. If that had happened, I think I would have gone over the edge, over the cliff. The job of an artist is to go to the edge, but not fall over.
An artist in turmoil, a nation in agony. 40 minutes, War Artist, next Tuesday at 9:50 on BBC2.
BBC2 now returns to Sarajevo, where the first snow fell today on a street under siege.
Hello, tonight on The Late Show, Then and Now, we raid the archives to look at the present through the past. Our subjects, the changing faces of feminism, fiction and football. That's The Late Show at 11:15.
Now on BBC2, Newsnight.
The government insists there has been no negotiating with Sinn Féin. Gerry Adams disagrees. Whatever the truth, officials say that if violence ends, the door is still open. Good evening. Only 24 hours after the Prime Minister appeared to lay down the terms under which Sinn Féin could join the negotiating table to talk peace, the new initiative appears in trouble. Tonight, a potentially damaging claim is circulating that this man, Sinn Féin's Martin McGuinness, personally attended negotiations. James Cox has been following events in Northern Ireland.
In Belfast, reports that British government officials have been having secret talks with leaders of Sinn Féin are now widespread and widely believed. Though vehemently denied in London, this has inflamed opinion among the unionists who say, if true, it renders John Major's Guildhall speech last night an exercise in hypocrisy.
And have the British and Irish governments been clumsy in their handling of the new peace initiatives? The former Irish Premier, Garret Fitzgerald, says yes. And how did the misunderstanding, or worse, over the alleged secret talks with Sinn Féin arise? Tom King, the former Northern Ireland Minister, is here. I'll be talking to him. Also tonight, In Washington, President Bill Clinton faces one of the biggest challenges yet to his presidency as trades unionists hold a huge rally outside Congress over his plans for a free trade deal. And as President F.W. de Klerk and Nelson Mandela work to finalize a new constitution for South Africa, how great is the threat of civil war? I'll be putting that question to a member of the South African government who's still in talks thrashing out a new constitution. Tonight's seen a stepping up of claim and counterclaim as to who's talked to whom on Northern Ireland. Following John Major's speech last night, when he pointedly left open the door to Sinn Féin, the British government has repeatedly denied suggestions that it has been involved in secret talks with Sinn Féin. But tonight came claims that Martin McGuinness, one of Sinn Féin's leaders, took part in such talks. Some suspect Republicans of pushing out false stories to drive a wedge between the British government and the Unionists. The Democratic Unionists, meanwhile, have been fiercely critical of Mr Major's speech, as some of the hardliners have, saying Britain is preparing to sell Ulster out. But Albert Reynolds, the Irish Prime Minister, heralded the speech as offering the chance of peace before Christmas. James Cox is in Belfast.
The pressure is now on Sinn Féin to show they're serious about wanting peace by renouncing violence. Here they're seen wearing their democratic hats at a news conference last weekend to announce candidates for the Euro elections. But claims today that Martin McGuinness, one of the hardline leaders, was involved in secret talks with British officials have further inflamed anger and suspicion among unionists.
I think that there is nothing new in the fact that a Tory government is prepared to talk to the IRA, because of course they've done it in the past. What would make it particularly hypocritical at this time is that you have the Prime Minister saying we can never sit down and talk to Sinn Féin while the IRA is carrying on its violence, and how it would make his stomach turn. And if at the same time contacts were going on with Sinn Féin and negotiations were taking place, I think it would blow that kind of nonsense out of the water.
Unionist fury is predictable, but how much of it is sincere? The Democratic Unionists, the DUP, have always and consistently said they'll never deal with terrorists or their surrogates. But the Ulster Unionists, led by James Molyneux, have been more equivocal. But London's plenipotentiaries up at Stormont may find it a risky business, wheeling and dealing among the various factions on both sides of the Northern Irish divide. If they have been dealing with Sinn Féin, however informally, the questions are who said what to whom and under what circumstances. Last night, in response to the Guildhall speech, Gerry Adams said that representatives of Sinn Féin have been in protracted contact and dialogue with the British government. However, Number 10 has repeatedly denied that any such talks took place, and the Northern Ireland Secretary, Sir Patrick Mayhew, said this morning that there has been no negotiating with Sinn Féin. No official has been talking to Sinn Féin on behalf of the British government. But yesterday, even before Mr Major spoke at Guildhall, the Belfast Telegraph was reporting that there had indeed been such meetings. The Telegraph correspondent, Vincent Carney, has what he describes as a good source within Sinn Féin.
He indicated they were officials acting on behalf of the British government, but he did stress that they were not local officials. He said they were, in his opinion, and from his knowledge, they were not from the Northern Ireland office. His reading of the situation was that the talks that they took place were initiated from Downing Street, and he claimed with full knowledge of John Major. Now, when I put it to him that the Northern Ireland office were denying these claims, he said they were perfectly entitled to do so because they probably didn't know about them. As far as he was concerned, they had been bypassed. That Downing Street was dealing directly with Sinn Féin, and that Downing Street had actually initiated the discussions.
It wouldn't be new for terrorists to be invited to the negotiating table. During one of the bloodiest stages of the Troubles, in 1972, William Whitelaw talked to the IRA. Harold Wilson, in opposition, had also done so. But now, according to Mr Major, officially, there's no talk until violence is ended. But even if they got round the table, what would they talk about? The agendas are so different as to be almost mutually exclusive. James Molyneux's Ulster Unionists want a local assembly or parliament, but will have no truck with any strengthening of Dublin's voice in Northern Ireland. John Hume's SDLP is prepared to discuss power sharing within the province, but only if that strengthens the links with the Republic. And what's in it for Sinn Féin? They will be conceding their so-called armed struggle has failed, but hoping that the political process would build up the momentum towards a united Ireland. And what if one of the parties said no? Well, the veto lies not with the politicians, but with the voters. The Anglo-Irish Agreement of 1985 said that any change in the status of Northern Ireland would only come about with the consent of the majority of the people of Northern Ireland. When Mr. Major met the Irish Taoiseach in Brussels last month, Mr. Reynolds accepted that point. But unionists say there's a difference between consent and self-determination, and fear that last night Mr. Major's language may have blurred the distinction.
He said that one of the important factors that had happened was that the Irish government was now prepared to accept the right of the people of Northern Ireland to determine their own future. Now, that of course is quite right, that they do have such a right, and hitherto the British government has accepted that right. But the significant thing is that the Irish government have never accepted that. And if Mr. Major thinks they have, that would concern me, because he would be making an error as to the true position of the Irish government.
So if, as it's been widely interpreted, Mr. Major's aim was to drive a wedge between the two unionist wings, he may in fact have drawn them closer together.
The unionist community is bracing itself for a further betrayal. It has consistently been the Conservative Party who have betrayed Ulster in the past. They did it to Carson in the early part of this century. Edward Heath did it in the Sunningdale Agreement. Margaret Thatcher did it in the Anglo-Irish Agreement, and it looks as if John Major's squaring himself up to do the same.
What do you see as the final objective of Mr. Major, do you think? Is he looking for some kind of joint government of the province?
Well, this government appears to believe that problems aren't something that you try and resolve. Problems are something that you try and get rid of. Northern Ireland is a problem, so let's try and get rid of Northern Ireland.
Tomorrow, Belfast's two morning papers, one unionist and one nationalist, are cooperating in conducting an opinion poll for peace. But it can hardly be more than a gimmick. Practically no one in Northern Ireland doesn't want peace. What they haven't been able to agree about for 25 years is how to get it.
James Cox. Well, earlier I spoke to the former Irish Prime Minister, Dr. Garret FitzGerald, the man who, with Mrs. Thatcher, signed the Anglo-Irish Agreement in 1985, which gave Dublin a role in Northern Ireland's affairs. I asked him whether recent signs of optimism were justified.
Well, I think there are grounds for guarded optimism, because a number of fairly fundamental changes have been taking place in the conditions which would be necessary to arrive at peace and a solution.
Are there any hard reasons for thinking that there's been a real change in, for instance, the IRA's approach?
I think it's evident that the IRA would like to end violence and are seeking a way out. I don't think that's in much doubt because of the way the Hume Adams talks went and the way in which Gerry Adams has not been challenged in his own camp and indeed been directly supported by the IRA in what he said.
Now, Articles 2 and 3 are clearly more than ever open to discussion. Do you have any doubts that if there were a referendum in the Republic, a deal could be done on them, that they would be changed?
If the referendum were in the context of some kind of settlement and agreement, then I think the change would have overwhelming support. Taken in isolation and just put to the people without any background or not part of an agreement, that might be more difficult, of course.
Now, you said it has to be as part of an agreement. What would the Unionists in the North have to give in return?
Well, what people want at this stage is peace, and they want an agreed solution in which in Northern Ireland, the people of Northern Ireland can agree as to how to govern that area together, and that North and South can work constructively together, and Britain and Ireland constructively together. I don't think people are setting hard and fast conditions.
What about the Unionists? Some of them are still very hard line against any sort of deal, and surely even if the IRA were to give up violence, there's still a good chance that there will be a sort of upsurge in loyalist violence, is there not?
Well, loyalist violence has generally been reactive against IRA violence, so that I think there are indications, clear indications, that if the IRA stopped, there's a very good chance that loyalist violence would stop also. But as far as the Unionists are concerned, it has to be said that last year they did come to Dublin to talk directly to the Irish government, which was not an easy thing for them to do. It required courage and commitment. I don't think they were as well received as they hoped, and they went away somewhat bruised from that encounter.
Now, you said that they went away rather bruised from that encounter. Do you think that the British and the Irish governments have handled this new momentum as well as they might have done?
I have doubts about that. But it's fair to say it's very difficult to try to get the talks going at a political level with unionists simultaneously with responding in some positive way to any chance of peace that might arise in the Hume Adams Initiative. Doing these two things together is difficult. But I think it has been handled somewhat clumsily on both sides, though there are, I think, clear indications today of both sides wanting to get back on course to, again and get into line with each other's positions as far as possible.
You say it's been handled somewhat clumsily on both sides. What sort of thing are you thinking of?
Well, I think there was an insensitivity in our government to the nationalist reaction when our government seemed to respond rather negatively to the Hume Adams Initiative. I'm sure our government in that were concerned to maintain a good relationship with the British government, but it certainly had negative effects amongst nationalists in the north. And then when they saw those effects, they swung back the other way and perhaps overemphasized the Hume Adams aspect. And today they seem to have come back into a more central position. Just as on the British side, some of Mr. Major's remarks were very extremely negative, and he, in what he said last night, has seemed also to want to come back towards a more central position.
So, supposing everybody does finally get round the table and start talking, what do you think that Sinn Féin in particular will bring to these discussions? Will it be possible to have discussions without them?
Oh, of course you can have discussions without them, and they can only be there if they end violence. And the constitutional parties, who represent 95% of the Irish people, can and must have talks in any event. But obviously, if it is possible to get Sinn Féin and the IRA to end their violence on the basis of some statement by the Irish and British governments that doesn't do violence to their positions, then that would be a very helpful element in any talks.
Well, we're joined now by the former Northern Ireland Secretary, Tom King. Tom King, we have these rumours going round like wildfire. From your experience in Northern Ireland, what on earth's going on?
I don't think there's anything in that rumour. I think James Cox had it right when he said that as a result of the Prime Minister's speech, the pressure is now on Sinn Féin. And it looks to me like a classical smokescreen. Instead of saying, now, OK, that's the offer, that's the possibility that there could be an involvement if you renounce and permanently renounce violence, that you could be involved in discussions. And so the question being to Jerry Adams, well, what about that? The answer comes back, we've already had talks. I mean, it's a complete non-answer to the question, and I think they're ducking the issue. And I think they're in real difficulties now.
Just before we talk about the difficulties they're in, do you think they are pushing out some of these rumours quite deliberately?
Yeah, I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. And the truth is that no government is going to talk. I'm sure they are. And the truth is that no government is going to talk to Sinn Féin, the IRA, at a time when they're actively advocating and perpetrating violence. That's always been the position. It was my position as Secretary of State. I'm absolutely sure that Prime Minister and Paddy Mayhew, as the current Secretary of State, would have nothing to do with it at all, and that would be the position.
So is that the difficulty that they're now in, that the ball is in their court?
It has been for some time. And the truth is, Gareth Fitzgerald had it right. They're rather trapped. They don't really know how to stop. They know, and those who are responsible in their leadership, know that they're getting nowhere with the violence. All they're doing is destroying the prospects of many young people in the whole of the island of Ireland for whom terrorism and the misery it causes great economic disaster. The unemployment rate's extremely high. Emigration continues from the south of Ireland. And this is part of the damage they're doing, and they don't know how to get out of it.
Hence the rumours, you would say. There's no possibility that minor talks have been exaggerated or anything like that.
No, I don't think there's anything in the talks. But what I do think is this is an opportunity in which to try and see, there's a very clear understanding, very clear statement by the British Prime Minister, which categorically states, we always said we wouldn't talk to people who indulged in violence. John Majordown has put the positive side of that. If you stop, and provided there is the assurance over a period that this violence has stopped for good, and isn't going to be immediately restarted, it's not some temporary ceasefire, but there is the prospect that we will talk to people who are engaged then in the democratic process and without the use of violence.
Now, you heard Gareth Fitzgerald saying there that he felt both Dublin and London had handled the Hume Adams talks rather clumsily. Do you think that has exacerbated the
No, I don't
difficulty?
necessarily agree with that. I mean, I'd say this to Gareth Fitzgerald. Remember, he's in opposition in Ireland. He's Fine Gael. He's not necessarily going to rush to support a Fianna Fáil Taoiseach, Prime Minister. But I think that he then fairly went on to say that in such difficult, sensitive issues as this, anybody can criticize what's happening. What I do think is that there is an opportunity here, recognized also, and I think one ought to recognize this, some of the BBC, not your report, which was correct, but some of the other BBC reports today have said all the political parties have welcomed this initiative except the unionists. That's not actually true. The only people who've come out strongly against it have been Ian Paisley and the Democratic Unionists. The official unionists, and James Molyneux is their leader, he at his party conference said something very similar. He said, provided there was a real assurance of the ending of violence, and provided there was a reasonable quarantine period, as he called it, he could see a situation which people could be involved in talks.
How long do you think the quarantine period should be? Some people have said 5 years, James Molyneux, others have said 6 months.
What you've got to think of is what would that quarantine period consist of? Would people hand in their weapons? Would there be some assurance that the arms had been surrendered? Would there be some assurance that there weren't still caches of arms and explosives hidden around, that there wasn't still training going on to reactivate a terrorist campaign?
Well, how long do you think that would take?
So how long that is as long as a piece of string. It's as long as the time that it takes to build the confidence that genuinely that there is peace and that the violence isn't going to be recommenced. Now, it's in everybody's interest. I mean, Sinn Féin people may say, well, we're on a hiding to nothing on that. All our weapons in the IRA, we'll lose all the weapons and we'll have no protection. But there has to be this mutual building of trust. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
Tom King, thank you very much indeed. Tomorrow, President Bill Clinton faces one of the biggest, potentially humiliating policy challenges of his administration when Congress votes on NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is designed to eliminate all trade barriers between the United States and its neighbors, Mexico and Canada. It's going to be a knife-edge vote, but if implemented, NAFTA will create the world's largest free trade area, covering more than 360 million people. President Clinton says the treaty will create jobs. Others believe millions of American jobs will be lost as businesses relocate in low-wage Mexico. Gavin Esler reports.
In the desert scrub along the Rio Grande in South Texas, the superpower rubs shoulders with the Third World. The U.S. Border Patrol is searching for illegal immigrants from Mexico and elsewhere in Latin America. In recent years, the trickle along the porous U.S.-Mexican border has become an unstoppable human flood of those streaming north to pursue their American dream, leading to fears that the U.S. is being swamped by an alien tide. Now this uneasy border is the key element in the North American Free Trade Agreement, embracing Canada, the US and Mexico, with hopes to create a common market rivaling the European community, eventually stretching from Alaska to the southernmost tip of Latin America, a decision many believe as momentous in its way as the creation of NATO. Not everyone agrees.
This agreement has to be defeated. It's no damn good for the workers in Mexico. It's not good for the workers in the United States, and it's not good for the workers in Canada.
Obviously, the President and Vice President have put a lot of time into this, and they see it as an issue as we come to the end of this century that's really going to help define this country's vision for the end of this century and really as we prepare for the next.
This is really a treaty for the past, and for folks not to understand that and see that is very distressing, because it raises questions about their judgments on other issues that we face down the road.
With friends like this, who needs enemies?
Whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the Fortune 500? Or are you on the side of the unfortunate 500,000 who will lose their job if this thing passes?
Of all NAFTA opponents, the White House fears David Bonnier the most. He is the #3 Democrat on Capitol Hill, and instead of rallying support for the president on this crucial vote, Congressman Bonnier in Chicago over the last frantic weekend of campaigning against NAFTA demonstrated the fundamental split at the heart of the Democratic Party.
And we're not going to let them get away with it!
With trade unions, black groups and other vital elements in the Democratic coalition now against the president, Mr. Clinton has found extraordinary allies.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
The White House has never seen anything like it. Every living U.S. president, These four on parade, plus Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, supports the NAFTA treaty. Mr. Clinton could have buckled to the demands of the grassroots within his party, yet is demonstrating considerable political courage, allying himself with former opponents, with, win or lose, profound consequences for his ability to lead.
We have to create a new world economy, and if we don't do it, we cannot then point the finger at Europe and Japan or anybody else and say, why don't you pass the GATT agreement? Why don't you help to create a world economy? If we walk away from this, we have no right to say to other countries in the world, you're not fulfilling your world leadership, you're not being fair with us. This is our opportunity to provide an impetus to freedom and democracy in Latin America and create new jobs for America as well. It's a good deal, and we ought to take it.
I thought that was a very eloquent statement by President Clinton, and now I understand why he's inside looking out and I'm outside looking in.
If the trades unions are opposed, American business is wholeheartedly behind NAFTA, seeing Mexico as an increasingly prosperous new market. The Lexmark company in Kentucky exports computer printers, but currently there's a 20% Mexican tariff to be paid. If NAFTA passes, the duty will go, giving U.S. companies a huge advantage over European and Japanese competition. But the unions fear jobs are still at risk.
With you paying your workers more than $11 an hour and health benefits and Mexican workers earning $1 or $2 an hour, why don't you just move to Mexico?
It's a very good question. It's certainly something a large, sophisticated business as ours periodically needs to consider. The answer is that labor costs are only one small part of the entire equation. If labor costs were the only criteria by which intelligent businesses decide where to locate, we would all be in Haiti.
President Clinton came to the Lexmark factory to argue that far from losing jobs to cheap Mexican labor, there will be net job gains for America.
I have worked my heart out for this because I think it's good for your jobs and good for your children's future. And I don't think we can afford to cut and run. We cannot turn away from the world.
One of the most compelling arguments for NAFTA is who supports the treaty and who opposes it.
The White House has attracted to its cause an intellectual camelot, the best and the brightest, including every U.S. Nobel Prize winner in economics, every former Secretary of State and Defense, including some of Bill Clinton's greatest critics, piling on board to back NAFTA to steer America away from protectionism and isolationism.
About once in a generation, this country has an opportunity in foreign policy to do something defining, something that establishes the structure for decades to come. There's nothing more important in the field of foreign policy that the Congress is going to do in the rest of this decade.
Why is it that you're not impressed by the intellectual weight on the other side? Why don't they impress you?
This is a treaty that's been put together by the elites of this country and Mexico and Canada. The people at the top, the corporate leaders, the striped pants crowd at the State Department. This is a treaty that was put together to protect property. To protect property. It was not put together in the interest of workers. This is basically Reaganomics internationally, and Reaganomics didn't raise very many boats. In fact, it sunk a lot of people. It's a shameful treaty.
The NAFTA debate, a special edition of Larry King Live with Vice President Al Gore and Ross Perot.
The White House has cleverly sidestepped a public confrontation with the trade unions and left-wing Democrats. Instead, they debated NAFTA with America's best-known political eccentric, Ross Perot.
This is not good for the people of either country.
If we should happen to give in to the politics of fear and make the wrong choice, the consequences would be catastrophic.
The billionaire's performance was exactly what the White House wanted.
Do you guys ever do anything but propaganda?
Isn't it your business also?
Would you even know the truth if you saw it?
No, it's legal.
Well, you're lying.
It's legal.
You're lying now.
Vice President Gore may have won the debate, but on this most complex issue, for most Americans, it is almost impossible to discover which side is telling the truth.
What would you think if the United States made an agreement that saved 700,000 American jobs and created 200,000 new jobs, eliminated trade barriers so America can sell its products in foreign markets? NAFTA. Good for jobs, good for us.
Congress is about to vote on the NAFTA trade deal. It's time to tell them it's a bad deal. NAFTA will cost America 500,000 jobs. In fact, 40% of manufacturing executives say they're likely to move some jobs to Mexico if NAFTA passes. Call your representative in Congress. Say NAFTA's a bad deal for America.
The electricians leader, Bill Bywater, has seen his union membership cut by half in little over a decade. The jobs exported to the Far East and Mexico. Trade unionists will try to unseat any Democratic congressman who votes for the treaty, he says.
They're angry about the fact that they may lose their job as a result of this agreement. And unfortunately, quite a large number of them will.
What do you make of the comment by the president that the unions are engaged in roughshod, muscle-bound tactics? He means...
That's fine. Let him say any stupid thing he wants to say. I believe that we should voice our opinion, say what we think, and if some president gets upset, and that's happened in the past, that's too damn bad.
In a short break from what the White House calls its NAFTA war room, the man charged by President Clinton to persuade Congress to support him, Bill Daley, son of the famous mayor of Chicago, admitted such internecine warfare within the party was being taken very seriously.
Threats like that very often will come back to haunt people who make them. This president won on behalf of working men and women. He would never do anything that was not in their best interest. This agreement will help create jobs in this country.
NAFTA is not just a test of President Clinton's leadership, but also